And we are live, and welcome everyone. Tonight we've got a wonderful guest, Karishma, who is a spiritual business life coach. And tonight we're going to talk about a lot of juicy topics. So subconscious mind, inner child, and trauma, amongst a few other topics. And I'm really excited because I know within the group we've touched on some of the topics. Tonight we're going to delve deep, we're going to dive in, and we're going to get a lot of good content out. So welcome, Karishma. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much for having me. I'm really excited to dive into these topics. And yeah, it's just an honor to be here. So thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. So can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, of course. Okay, so I'm Karishma Sharma. I am a spiritual business and mindset coach, breakthrough expert, and energetics queen. So I work a lot with energy. And the main reason I am here to talk with you is because I have done a lot of work on myself. I previously struggled with anxiety, depression, anxiety attacks, and also just the usual, going through really bad breakups, and also just struggling with sort of weight and things like that, turning to food, for example, as comfort. So I took that and then ended up coming across spirituality, and that basically helped me transform my life. So working inwards out, and it's basically changed everything for me, which is why I then went on thinking, this is how I want to be, this is what I want to do to help other women and just really, really transform their lives as well. So my main focus is helping women to overcome subconscious and energetic blocks in their life so that they can take quantum leaps and manifest the life that they truly desire. So that is me in a nutshell. I'm kind of I like to think of myself as a remix between woo-woo and science, because I do a lot of metaphysics, quantum physics, studying at the moment to be a spiritual practitioner as well, which is part of New Thought movement. So things like people like Oprah Winfrey and Michael Beckwith, those are like some of the famous names that have come out of this work. So I'm following in their footsteps at the moment.
That's okay. Okay, let's go. Right. You gave us a lot there I want to look into before we start.
Mhm.
Um, so you said that you've been through anxiety, weight gain, emotional eating, and the key for you there was working from the inside out. Can you talk to us a little bit more about what that process was like? Because a lot of people struggle with weight gain, they struggle with emotional eating, they struggle with anxiety and depression. It's all because there's a root cause that's inside, something that we haven't addressed that we need to sort of address. And I say some of that to my clients. They say, well, listen, and I think it's really, especially in fitness, we say, oh, well, you can exercise it out, come join PT, and then I'm like, no, sometimes you've got to check the emotions first before you could even go on to fitness. So I love that. So talk to me a little bit more about what that process was like for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're so right. It all comes down to like what's going on within. So for me is I was just really, really struggling. And when you're in that mindset, when you're in that feeling of just being at rock bottom, there's literally like you feel like there's nothing that can pick you up. And for me, a lot of people will turn to drugs or to alcohol. For me, it was food. It was just comfort eating. That was the only thing that made me feel good. And it was, going to a counselor, for example, but that just wouldn't change anything for me. I just didn't connect with the counselor. So I was, I just felt really alone. I felt like in my culture you can't really talk about being depressed or anxious or those sort of things. That's very taboo. So I just felt very alone, and so like the only thing that was there was sort of food for me. And then when I used to go to the temple every Sunday, and I saw that there was these people doing sort of healing there, and it was something that I'd never really come across. And I was like, what is this energy healing? I don't really understand it. And I was like, you know what have I got to lose? Let me just give it a go. And I sat there, and they sort of did their thing. And when I closed my eyes, I could just see darkness. And then as they started doing more of it, it just started shifting. And then it became lighter and lighter and lighter. And then I just felt good. I just felt like so different. It was like the best I felt in such a long time. So then I was like, whoa, this is insane. So I went back, and I went back for more. And then they were like, you're so like, what's the right word? Like, I just channeled a lot of energy. And they were like, why don't you do this? Why don't you train in this? So I trained, and I became a pranic healer, and started doing crystal healing as well. And then that kind of snowballed into personal development. And then I started doing, then I connected with like a spiritual coach, did a whole certification in subconscious reprogramming and trauma work, inner child healing. And then that sort of snowballed into the business expanding. And then yeah, just took like the energy work with me along the way, and that started to get more and more powerful the more I started to work on it. And then yeah, before you know it, here I am, like coming to people's groups talking about my story. So
I want to go a little bit deeper. So two things. Culturally, where are your cultural origins?
so I'm so, grandparents are from India, parents are from Africa, and I was born here. But so it's kind of like a mixture of all that, but essentially Indian. I'm Hindu, so follow the Hindu culture. But yeah, it's like, if you want to confuse a child, why not like have, you know, all those different continents, not even countries, like involved, you know.
I think it's beautiful though, because when you look at it from a spiritual point of view, African and Indian spirituality is quite powerful. So to have those roots embedded within like your DNA, like that's some powerful stuff that you're working with.
Yeah.
So I think that's beautiful. So you were in the temple when you discovered that they were doing, so the healing, does this take part? Is this a normal part of how things happen in the temple, or was this something? No.
No, it just happened to be they had like a spare room on the side, and they just happened to be using it because it was an empty space that was free. But for me, it was just the right moment for me. It was perfect design. It was meant to be there for me, and that's the way I see it. Is like, that is basically how I started my healing journey, and led me to a whole different path.
I believe in that. Everything is meant to be. Things don't just randomly appear. I think everything has a purpose, right? So I know a lot of people struggle with emotional eating, and I had one period in my life when because couldn't identify with it. I was like, well, I love to eat, by the way. I'm not a calorie counter. I'm not one of those PTs who are like, go count calories and have like only 2,000. Like, no. I like food. So I couldn't really relate to clients who would come and say, well, Nora, like, I'm really struggling with eating, and I eat to sort of forget my problems or to deal with stress. I couldn't identify with it.
Yeah.
And I really believe that life is purposed so that in order for you to serve the people that you're meant to serve, you have to sort of have some sort of relatability with them, right? And
Absolutely.
so I couldn't really serve them from that point of view, because I couldn't understand, and I really don't believe you could teach what you don't know. Like, it's just not possible. And so when I did my second master's, I was starting a business. Then I had my daughter, who was 7 at the time, and my master's was really hard. And I remember my family came up from the States and we spent Christmas together, but it was a really hard time because I had a few papers to write, which was incredibly difficult. They were incredibly difficult. And then microbiology, which is like just a different language.
Wow. That's incredible.
I failed everything. And I was just like, oh boy, this is not good, because I got a scholarship to go. So I couldn't fail. And so I remember I had to pass my microbiology. And when I set my mind to something, I do it, right? And I remember one night I had in my living room just flow charts of like the Krebs cycle and like all the different like microbiological systems in the body and how everything interconnected. And I had a little bottle of calamus with me because it helps with like, memory as well. And at that particular point, it hadn't kicked in, and I was just not grasping stuff. And I was finding myself reaching for food. Wasn't hungry, wasn't hungry at all, didn't need to eat. And I remember one time I was eating a chocolate bar, and I was like, okay, you know when like your body goes, okay, that's enough. And I was still eating beyond the point of fullness, to the point where I felt sick, and I was like, okay, I need to check this. And I was like, so this is what it feels like for people who don't slow down and stop and look at why they're being driven to eat. And so for me, I realized that because I usually study in silence, I can't have any kind of music or anything on. And I realized I just needed to, I was so super stressed out, and like my eyebrows started turning gray.
Oh, wow.
I have like 3 resident gray eyebrows.
Oh, that's brilliant.
I was so stressed out. And I was like, okay, what can I do? Because like as a PT, again, like you cannot wear your weight. Like, there's that whole other thing as well. And like I gained tummy weight when I got stressed. It was just a whole big mess. But I'm so grateful I went through that. And so for me, I realized that the only thing that I could do at that time was to watch comedy and just
Okay.
lighten the whole mood. And so I found this program called Jennifer's Diary. I love her to bits. Like if I ever meet her, like I don't know how I'd ever repay her. Like she like got me through like my masters. Like I was just laughing to the point of tears. And then I was so relaxed. I didn't need food. And I was able to retain things because I was so relaxed with that. And I found a different way. So I could relate to clients who have, struggles with that. But mine wasn't a very long one because I knew what was happening. Talk to me about what your process was like, and how you realized, okay, this is not what I need to be doing for my best self, and what steps you took to sort of reverse that.
Yeah, so for me, it did go on for quite a long time, but not to the point that I was feeling physically sick or anything. I just kept noticing. It's like you're sitting there noticing that the weight is just piling on, like, clothes you're trying to put jeans on, like that's probably the best way, is jeans is like the biggest way to like show what's been going on. And it's like I knew in my head, like I knew it was happening, and people could see it. I could see like I had to wear bigger jumpers and things like that. And I just didn't see myself. And it's kind of like in some ways you're in like denial, because you're like, no, I'm not one of those people that has, a problem or whatever. And it took me a long time. It wasn't until I did like my inner work, my subconscious work, where I found out where that actually came from. And like you said in the beginning, there's always a root problem of why things happen. And I actually found out that the root problem of that was an unhealed relationship. Yeah, so it was because I had a broken relationship with someone I was quite close to. Um, that just because that just kept going on for so long, that relationship hadn't healed. It just kept piling on. The weight just kept piling on, and it wasn't until, yeah, like I said, until I did my inner work, I did my trauma work, and that came up, and I was just like, holy shit, if I hadn't have found that out, that wouldn't have come up, that wouldn't have made sense, and that wouldn't have like got to the point where I could just release that. And that was such a big eye-opener for me. And like I was reading Louise Hay as well, who is absolutely incredible, and it was so interesting because where she wrote that where overweight, it connects to protecting from hurt and criticism, abuse, and fear of life. And those were just like, are you talking about me? Kind of thing.
Oh yeah, it's really
like,
connected.
yeah, it was just like, wow, that made so much sense. And yeah, to be able to go into like, the subconscious and like pick out where things have come from, that is probably the most powerful thing I've ever seen in terms of healing. It's just unbelievable how powerful the subconscious mind is. And it's amazing that you're already sort of talking about it in your group, which really will help so many of the ladies in there.
Let's dig into that. So for people who are new to the group, let's talk about what the subconscious mind is and how you did that work with the subconscious to even find, how do you even know to work with the subconscious to find out what that block was, and what that process looked like from you knowing that you had to work with the subconscious mind, how you did it, and then how you found that root cause. And is that something that somebody can do on their own, or do they need to have like a practitioner work with them to do that?
Yeah, so from like a spiritual perspective, the subconscious mind is like this huge memory bank that holds like energetic coding within like the consciousness of an individual. And it's like the automated habitual aspect of the psyche. And it's basically where it holds like all of like the sort of records of like all lifetimes, all, you know, mental pictures, everything. So it's like a big bank. And then this subconscious, like the subconscious mind runs between 95 and 97% of what we do,
Yeah,
which is
crazy.
crazy.
Yeah.
And where this all these memories are held, where they're running on old programming from what we've been, so basically from a young age, from I think about 3 years old, we start picking up what's going on around us. So whatever our parents are doing or saying, whatever we're seeing on TV, whatever we're seeing in society, what we're learning when, you know, like around other kids, that all starts to get programmed. And if it's like, you know, like negative stuff, for example, that's sitting in there. And until we go back into the subconscious and reprogram that to something new, we're just running on this old programming. And if that's running 95%, for example, of what we do, you've got that 5% of us consciously thinking like, oh yeah, you know, I need to go and speak to Nora today. Whereas in the back of my head, there's like all this other stuff going on. So it's just so powerful to think 95% of that programming, what is in there? You know, from the age of like, I think 3 is where you really start picking up programming. But I think what they're starting to discover now is actually it goes way back further than that. It's like even in the womb, the amount that you pick up is just unbelievable. So yeah, that is really powerful stuff. And the reason why I got into like subconscious reprogramming is because I did a certification in I did like spiritual certification, which covered spirituality, business, and mindset as well. And my coach, who is Dr. Erin for Haskell, she's based in the US, and she's trademarked a method called E4 trauma method, which I'm certified in. And I'm probably, sorry?
E4 trauma.
E4 trauma method. Yeah. And so I'm probably one of like 20 people in Europe that do it currently. And what this does is it really goes into the subconscious mind. And this is where we start going into trauma and sort of inner child healing, and also past life regression as well. So that it's really powerful. And I think it's just important to understand for like those who are maybe a bit newer to it, is like, where does this programming come from? And so there's different areas where we pick up, you know, what programming we have. Is like DNA, for example, you know, the traumas that ancestors, for example, have suffered, you know, that travels through. Yeah.
Yeah, can we talk about that? Because I, like, obviously I'm Black.
yeah absolutely.
So, yeah,
so
and
you
yeah,
must,
with
yeah,
slavery and stuff like that. And
absolutely.
who was I talking to about this? I talk about it with a couple of my family members, but Nicole. And we were saying, because like that wasn't something I was, and I like to talk about things that people don't talk about, because it's the only way that you're going to learn and develop and grow.
Absolutely.
And I cannot watch slave movies.
Okay.
I cannot do it. I can't watch people being whipped. I can't. And I'm like, was I like a slave in my past life where something, because it physically does something to me, like I can't take it. And then when I realized, because you know, they have like roots and 12 years a slave, like you could give me £1 million, I wouldn't go near it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I heard that trauma is passed through the DNA generationally, and I mean, it's not just with, you know, Africans, for example. Then you look at like the Jews with the Holocaust, and that was really traumatic. And you look at all the other cultures that have had some sort of trauma or civil war or something where there have been populations that have been wiped out. And I'm not saying anything was worse or better, because trauma is different for different people, but trauma is trauma all the same. And you pass that through, to the generations, then that I just kind of I felt a bit hopeless, because I'm like, oh, like we as a race, I don't feel like we've healed from, this is not a race talk, but I don't feel like we've healed from the trauma. And I don't think any particular group, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, has as a culture come together to look at, okay, this is what we've, been through as a culture. It's been traumatic and it's been devastating for us as a people, as who we are. Let's heal that. I haven't read anything about anybody doing that. And when I read, and I felt kind of bad, because I'm like, oh my God, I'm a mom. And like, I have Vivi, and like, I've passed stuff on to her. But so that was just like, yeah, mind blowing to hear that.
Yeah, but here's the thing. It's like, we now are the cycle breakers. And that is like the most incredible thing, is now we are so aware and we can break these cycles because we can heal. And when you heal, they say that you're healing 7 generations forwards and 7 generations backwards, because you're breaking that trauma, you're breaking that cycle. And that is what is so powerful. And it's just like with DNA, like, this is getting a bit technical, but it's just like, even with like past lives and like DNA, it's like your DNA sort of scrunch, but as you start healing, it sort of starts to open up and it starts to read the way it should, without being like all, like scrunched up because of all the trauma along the track. And spiritually, I just find that so fascinating, the fact that you can clear, your track by getting all those traumas reprogrammed to something amazing. So all is not lost. I know what you're saying. And that would be incredible if, like a whole culture came together to say, let's do this. But there's so many people who are now doing their inner work, they're, doing their healing, and it's probably the biggest at the moment than it's ever been before. There's just so many people involved in making change, breaking cycles, and we just have to embrace that and just be like, yes, we are the ones, we are making change. And like your little one is going to be a whole different way of going forward, because you're doing your work and it's going to make a difference, definitely. So I'm excited for everyone.
It's powerful stuff. Okay, so let's start with, because I find this is a juicy bit. So the E4 trauma technique, does that why is it different? And because obviously she's trademarked it, it's a different technique of dealing with trauma. Why is that different? And how does that work with releasing trauma? So I would say to you, okay, Karishma, I want to heal generational trauma, right? Do that for me. How does that work?
Okay, so I think first, just to clarify in terms of trauma for everyone, because I know trauma is sometimes a trigger word, and people instantly go into, well, I haven't been into a car accident, I haven't been to war or something like that. But from a spiritual perspective, trauma is like an incident where we're in a high negative state of emotion, and then we basically plant like a lie or limited belief or like a divided perspective into the subconscious mind. And then people are running on that, running their lives on that. And also like that's sort of how the DNA also comes in. So in terms of like the E4 trauma method, there's a lot of different ways that you can do subconscious work. This is, I've experienced this myself, which is why I'm trained in it. So the E4 trauma method, basically it's like 4 E's. So it's re-experience. So you're re-experiencing a traumatic incident. So say, for example, we went into session, I would take you back into an experience for you to re-experience what was happening as if you're there in the moment. And so when you are in that, you don't evaluate what's happening. You basically just talk as if you're there in the present. You're not like giving a backstory of what's happening, like, oh, I think this could be the reason why. Or you're literally like, the room has blue curtains, there's a door in front of me, like very much like you're in the present moment. And then I get you to basically connecting to the emotions that were felt at the time. So you're really, really going back into that situation, and you're releasing the charges, you're neutralizing the emotions from from that incident. You're basically clearing out all the negativity that was implanted at that moment. And then, sorry?
How do you clear the emotions? So I'm in something that's traumatic for me, that feels very highly stimulating and really intense.
Mm-hmm.
How am I clearing that?
So basically, the process that I would take you through, it's your emotions will basically, as you're experiencing the emotions, because I'd take you into the process a few times, so you'd feel your emotions would start going upwards, and then once it's experienced enough and the charge has released, the emotions will start to go back down, and that's when you know those it's been neutralized. You'll see a difference in someone's emotions and how they're reacting, and that goes back down. And then you get to a point of enlightenment, which is where you're releasing, completely releasing, and shifting back into the freedom of your own choice of what you want to declare for yourself going forward. So it is incredibly, incredibly powerful, really powerful.
People who have gone through something really traumatic, so you this re-experience stage, you've got to do that. It's not just a one-off. You've got to go through that event a couple of times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So, yeah,
yeah.
that's
And I know what you're saying. You know, obviously people have been through very traumatic incidents, and it's probably something that you'd find people would be resistant to. And that's one of the things, is if someone's resisting, then you can't really take them forward in that process. But just a trigger warning, I've worked with people who have been raped. I've worked with people who have, you know, lost loved ones, who have had people die, who have you know, lost babies. I've had, you know, people who have been through really horrible experiences, people who have been beaten up, people who have basically seen like someone try to commit suicide in front of them. So I've I've helped people who have been through some really horrible stuff. Obviously it's all individual basis. It's down to the individual if they really want to get to that point of healing, and if they're ready to go there. Because if they're resisting it, then consciousness is just going to block it, and you know, you won't be able to progress. But it's just such a powerful way to clear that out. And I've done it for myself. I've cleared so much, and I've just felt such a different, like I was such a different person when I was, you know, depressed and anxious and having those anxiety attacks. And you know, it just hit me the other day that actually I used to take a lot of like painkillers, not like an addiction, but just because I was constantly in pain. And I realized the other day that I don't take medication like the way I used to. Like I'll have it now and again if I have like a really bad headache or something like that, but I used to have it every day or every other day because I was just in so much pain. But yeah, through like all this healing, through energy work, through like all this trauma work, through just releasing all that negativity from my body, it's just, yeah, it's amazing like how physically everything starts to change once you do your inner work, and it works inside out. So it's like even like what I'm seeing in the outside world is reflecting back as well, which is really incredible as well. So powerful stuff.
My mind is like going, I want to go back into the E4 method. So re-experience and then enlightenment. And what are the other two steps?
Okay, so it's re-experience. So you re-experience the situation, and then evaluation, which you don't evaluate the situation. and then it's then you feel the emotions, and then it's enlightenment.
So somebody working with you would have to do like what, a few sessions with you before it's not a rushed process, is it? It's a few.
No,
Yeah,
no.
it's good. Okay, that's good.
Yeah,
So the
I mean,
alignment.
you for like one incident, you can have a massive shift in just one session. The reason why it's kind of advised that you do quite a few sessions is because a lot of people will come to you with something and they'll have a massive shift in just one session, and they think like, that's it, I'm healed, like everything's sorted. But it's not just one incident that, you know, that's got all those triggers. There's like different incidents. It could be something as small as you know, like something like, you know, you went into class when you were like 5 years old, and then the teacher said something to you and you got upset about it, but that could still be having an effect. Because I worked with a client who that happened to. She went into class and the teacher sort of made fun of her, and she was probably like 5 years old, and for 20 years she held on to that, and she wanted to like become, you know, like a world-renowned speaker, and she just couldn't speak up because her teacher basically said that little thing to her when she was really young, that, or you know, something about stop talking, or, and that just where it was in her subconscious mind. And so she was just like, oh, I can't speak up, I can't speak up, the whole of her life for 20 years, until she did like her trauma work with me. And now she's like, you know, become a coach, she's doing a speaking gig, she's on fire. And it's just amazing how something so small can stop us. I worked with someone else who they got their GCSE results, and their mother was really disappointed, and so her self-worth just completely dropped, and throughout life she's just had no, like, such lack of self-worth. Her husband cheated on her, which then brought all of it up again, and then she came to me and we basically did all her inner work. Now she's also become a coach, she's like helping people, she's become a self-worth coach, because she lacked it for so long, since the age of like, I think, what were we, 15 when we get GCSE results? Yeah, something like that. So long ago. So yeah, so it's just like little, even the smallest thing that someone says to you in an incident can actually affect so much of your life, which is so crazy. And just talking about sort of like I know this is going over into like inner child healing, but even that is also very much based on, you know, a traumatic incident. For example, I was working with a client and we basically went back to her being at the age of 7, and so she made her dad a Father's Day card, and she took it into him and he just looked at it and sort of chucked it and just didn't acknowledge it. And so she went away, and she was devastated. She had made this card, she put all her, you know, her heart and soul into it, and from that incident she was just like, you know, I'm not good enough, my whatever I do is not good enough. And she's like, you know, she's got herself into an incredible job in finance, but she's just always felt, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough. Like anytime there's a promotion, or anytime she's trying to get like, you know, a sale or something, she's just got this running thing of, I'm not good enough, because that's how her father made her feel at the age of 7. But now, you know, she's gone into that, reprogrammed that, and it's just like, it's changed so much for her. And like, just by doing that, you know, going back, connecting in with that child, and just telling them what they needed to know at that time. And quite interestingly for me as well, I had something come up just in meditation the other day. And so like for me, like my business is starting to, you know, really move forward, and there's a lot more visibility coming through, like with, I've got some speaking opportunities and things like that. And I just felt like there's still something holding me back, like I just couldn't figure out what it was. And what actually came to me was, I could see like little Karishma holding on to me, like, you can't, because for me, I grew up like being unheard, unseen, and unloved. That was my thing, was unheard, unseen, and unloved. And so little Karishma was like, you can't, you'll get in trouble, kind of thing. And like, this was like the vision I had. It was so crazy. And I was like, that's why I can't bring myself to be visible or speak up or, you know, show up on like social media the way I want to, because little Karishma is terrified. So it was just like I had to sort of go in and, you know, connect to little Karishma and just speak to her and just tell her that it's okay. Like, you don't have to be scared anymore. And it's just like things have just snowballed from there. And I've just got like so many incredible opportunities that have come up now. And I'm like, what? That's crazy. It's so, so crazy how like you don't even realize like the little you is just like, but you can't do that, you'll get in trouble, or like, you know, or like they just need a little bit of, you are loved, I love you, you know, and that's all they need to know. And things just change. It's just really powerful, really, really powerful work.
I have questions. To comment on the inner child one, I'm reading this book called Overcoming Under Earning, and it was talking about connecting to the inner child and how your inner child feels about money at different ages of people who have like money blocks. And that was really interesting to see how we are programmed, you know, with our thoughts on money from our parents and experiences that we have gone through with our families, and how as children we go into like protective mode, we set certain limits, or we push money away because of what, you know, what we experience for some people.
Yeah.
Okay, so my questions, I've got three, because you said a lot of really interesting things. So what has resonated with me, Karishma, is that a lot of times we don't, now we're looking at helping children to deal with emotions more. Like children's mental health is becoming a thing, right? How, and I don't know if this is your line of work, but how do you support a child? Because obviously prevention is better than cure, right? And as you were talking about this, I looked at my pregnancy and how I bring Vivi up. And obviously you can't protect your child from everything, because my father calls me a helicopter mom. Proud. And I'm an attachment parent. So but then my pregnancy was super stressful. Like, it wasn't a happy time for me at all. And I look at what I have exposed her to, and I know that there were a couple of incidences in school that were very traumatic for her. And I think about them and I just get so like angry about them. So how do we support children to be able, and what we have at home now, because my cousin Nicole, she's a parenting coach, and I'm very strict with Vivi sometimes. But I also raised her to have to sort of like, because I don't know if in your culture it's, you know, seen and not heard, but in my culture it's like, be seen and not heard. And do as I say, you know, not as I do. You talk when you're spoken to. You don't give me your opinion. What I say is that's it. And I try not to raise Vivi like that. I'm like, if I'm being too much, or if you feel like I'm not giving you control, then you need to speak up and tell mommy that that's not okay. So I want her to be in her power. And so we have a magic mat, where on that mat, this is not my idea, this is Nicole's idea, that on this mat, anything goes. You could say whatever you want. There's freedom to express yourself. There's no judgment on my part. I don't tell you that you're right, you're wrong. I just listen. I'm just there to take it in and to acknowledge how you feel. And we did that, and I was so hugely freeing for her. But in a situation with children who are going through a lot of things where it's traumatic, how do we teach them from young how to do this work? Because I imagine that that's where it needs to start. Not to wait until you're an adult where you have all this shit that's already happened and you're trying to fix it. Does that make sense? So how do you, can you do this work with children, teaching them steps to, because I know a lot of the mums on this group probably might want to know if a child, because a lot of it is school related as well. And school is not easy nowadays as well. You go to school, sometimes the child won't want to tell you everything because they're still trying to process what has happened, right? So how do you support a child to be able to do their own inner child work because they're still growing, so that child is always there, right, to an extent. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert by any means on children. I don't have any of my own, and I've not worked with children. But what I can share is, obviously, the E4 trauma method is probably the most powerful way of doing subconscious reprogramming. But there's other things that you can do as well. This might be more relevant for the mums who can try these things. And one of the things which is actually quite fun as well is getting into like a high ecstatic state. And then so it could be like sticking on music and just dancing in the kitchen and just feeling good and just getting in that high vibe, and then commanding stuff into the subconscious mind. So like, you know, you could stick on music in the kitchen or in the sitting room and just dance around with the kids, and then just be like, I am powerful, you know, like I am worthy, and just like have these powerful commands into the like affirmations into the subconscious mind. And when you're in that high ecstatic state, it's like so much more powerful than just saying it out as normal. So that is like really, really powerful. And also like the other tips are things like, you know, getting them into like visualization, like what, you know, getting them to visualize like the life that they want. I mean, obviously not like 20 years down the line, but just like, you know, a bit closer to them, like what sort of things do they like, you know, what makes them feel good, and just getting them into those sort of positive things, like saying affirmations also. Obviously getting into the high ecstatic state, but even like, you know, it could be I know kids aren't at school at the moment, and you know, it could be the drive to school or even walking to school, just like, you know, saying affirmations, getting that programmed into them as well. I mean, I don't know how well kids sit still, but like meditation, trying to get them to do like a bit of meditation. I know journaling is probably more for older kids, but even if like they get creative, just like expressing themselves, if it's painting, it could just be, you know, they express themselves that way. And that way they're not just holding stuff in, they're letting it out. And I think that's one of the main things is like, as kids, I mean, for me, I know I held so much stuff in, and that is kind of like, you know, where I felt like I wasn't heard. And that just sort of came up more and more and more until I dealt with it. And just like, you know, the language that's being used around them, as well as like, how are they talking to themselves? Like, are they being hard on themselves? Are they, you know, speaking with love, with gratitude? Yeah, that's another thing, is like teaching them gratitude from a young age, because the more you come from a place of gratitude, the more that's going to reflect back. The more you come from a place of like scarcity, if you're teaching, you know, the child like coming from a place of scarcity, like, oh, we can't do this, or we, you know, you can't do that, or something like that, then that's just going to be like the programming they grow up with. And that's going to, you know, they're going to go into school and be like, oh no, we can't do that. Or, you know, they then eventually go to work or whatever, and they're just going to have that same mindset. So it's like little things like that can really help them from a young age. And like, if you think like, if so, like everyone started doing that from now, like the next generation, like what lifestyle they're going to have, like how successful they can be without even trying. It's going to be amazing. So those are just a few little tips, but yeah,
Big
obviously
tips.
Sorry.
Big ones. Yeah, no, those are good tips. Those are big ones. Okay, I've got another one. And thank you for that. So when you were going through your process with emotional eating, did you already train? You didn't already train in the E4 method. So you discovered this before you discovered the E4 method. So did you discover this block with the unhealed or the broken relationship before you went on to train?
No,
Okay.
I sort of overcame the whole eating thing eventually, like as I was doing sort of my energy healing and all that. But it's only when I did my subconscious work that I actually understood the root of the problem. So yeah, it's just
Dive into
interesting.
that.
Sorry.
Can we dive into that? So what was the subconscious work that you did? Because I think there are a lot on the group who, emotional eating is a thing, how would you advise them to do their own subconscious work to figure out what the root cause is? Because I love that. I think that's quite a big topic as well. What would your guidance be on that?
Yeah, I mean, so like journaling is a great way. Just literally write and just basically think about, if you write about all the things that you've been through in life, like literally write through all the hard stuff that you've been through. And I know it sounds horrible, but
I didn't mean to do that. I'm like, oh God. That's a lot of journaling. Okay.
Yeah, it's like, and some of the time, like a lot of the women I work with, and it's just this whole, it all comes down to very common limited beliefs, and it's like not being good enough, and not feeling heard or seen, not feeling loved. Like those are the main ones that come up. And so it's like, when you start to write about what you went through, then you look at it from a different perspective, because you're now further along from that incident, and you can look at it from a different angle. Obviously, subconscious work, it's probably best to work with someone who is certified in, like, there's, like I mentioned, several different ways of doing it, and all the things that I mentioned for the kids as well, adults can do the same thing. Those are ways of reprogramming the subconscious mind, but obviously it's really hard to get to the root of the problem without doing like the proper processes. And there's obviously the E4 trauma method, which is what I do, but there's like loads of different ones. I think it's NLP, there's like tapping, there's so many different ones. So I mean, I don't want to sort of give the wrong advice and tell people to just go off and do it on their own, because you can get into quite an emotional state, and obviously you want to be in the right place, have someone support you through it. So that's what I would advise, is like work with someone who's experienced in dealing with it. But other than that, it's like to help reprogram the subconscious mind is like all the things that I mentioned for the kids as well. There's no reason why adults can't do it. Even breath work, if we chuck in breath work as well for adults, I don't know if that works with kids as well, obviously. Yeah,
I breathe. I used to shout, I don't, I breathe. And the other day I was feeling so stressed out, and I was like doing my laundry, and I was just like, I need to stop and breathe. And I had like clothes everywhere, and I literally stopped in the middle of the day and got on the floor just like that, and I was just breathing. And Vivi came and she looked at me, she goes, Mommy, you're breathing. And then she just came, because my arms are arched, she just came, put her head there, and she just laid down there with me. And then I was really quiet, obviously, and she started breathing as well. So the breath work is like, I find it so powerful, because we have the tools that we need already, most of them inbuilt within us. And I think this is why conversations are so important to have with people in their various fields of expertise, because you can talk about it from your own experience and share how, something as simple as just breathing, how it helps to shift energy, calm you down, clear your mind, and just bring you back to a state of being. So that's a really powerful one.
Yeah, it is definitely. And even if you like stick on, like on YouTube, you stick on like there's different like shaking things that you can do.
Can we talk about that? Because I gave my girls that on my group. Is it TRE, trauma release or something like that, right? TRE, trade, there's a method. And I think it was my mom who was talking about it, like, because you hold stored energy and emotions in your body, and it's about just shaking it out. And surprisingly, there wasn't that much. Like some topics, manifestation, right? You get hundreds of thousands, millions on that on YouTube. But shaking and trauma, like shaking trauma, that's a big one. So have you had experience with that one?
Yeah, it was, I can't remember. Is it Sharmic? I can't remember what it's called. But I did it as part of a group. One of my coaches made us do it to start off this year. which was really actually quite fun. So we did like 3 minutes of breath work, and then we did the shake it. She's like, she put the music on, and we all like kind of like, oh, this is a bit weird. And then once you just sort of shake a little bit, and then you're just kind of like, you know what, screw it, I'm just gonna go for it. And then you just let go and you just shake. And I did it actually earlier today because I was like by myself. The family were at, and I was just like, I'm just gonna go for it. And I didn't even stick on music. I literally just shaked about, and oh, I felt so good after. It was just so
I like
good.
that you mentioned that. I really like that you, because I did it in my class tonight. They didn't know I was making them shake, but I was like, shake it out, shake it out. And they didn't know they were shaking stuff out.
I love it.
It's so important, but like I just think, because they say like an animal in the wild, and it was really sad because they did an experiment on a polar bear, and they were showing how, like, when we go through something traumatic, sometimes we tense up and we get really tight. And even sexually, they were talking about how that impacts you as well, which is, people don't really talk about that, but that's important. And they showed the bear coming out of being, what do you call that thing when they put it to sleep? What's it called? It's a T something. Tranquilized.
Yeah.
Yes. So they showed the bear coming out of being tranquilized, and it was just shaking, and it was showing how like the nervous system was coming back, and how it was calming itself down and releasing all of the stress. But we as human beings, like, we go into something, a situation where we're so like tense and tight, and we don't ever really let go. And I think the shaking thing, it's definitely a topic that needs more conversation. But I've got two other questions, and then we can wrap up. So inner child work, I want to just tap into a little bit more, but let's look at a child who has gone through trauma or something stressful, or for me personally, I am a high achiever, and I struggle with certain parts of self-esteem if I don't achieve something that, like, if I'm a perfectionist, and I know perfect people that proudly say, oh, I'm a perfectionist, and people say that, I'm like, ooh, you have self-esteem problems.
Call it what it is.
It's true though, and it's not like an attack, but it is like, there's no such thing as perfection, and if you're reaching for a state of perfection, then it's something within you that's not happy with just good enough, because there's nothing as perfection. So for me, I go back to certain instances in childhood where, like in my culture, it was always, we had 11 plus exams, and it was always education, and it was always like everything had to be pristine, perfect, and clean. That's too much pressure. And you set children up, and I know a lot of cultures have that, and not so much in Europe, but I know, like, definitely in the Caribbean we have that. And you set children up to always be reaching for a state of perfection, and you fail, and you just think, oh my God, like, I'm really not that great. So I had to do work around that, and it's still a process, because I still find myself, like, this year my motto is strive for progress, not perfection. And that's just so calming for me, because I just, it's good enough, and I just say, okay, this is good enough, it's not going to be perfect, let it go. But how do you work around somebody like that, who, because I know it's not just me, who has limiting beliefs? Because I know a lot of people say, oh, well, you have a limiting belief and you can just do this, write something to the opposite. And I'm like, that doesn't work. Like, I find limiting beliefs are quite difficult. And I get almost frustrated with the term, because everybody's like, well, you have a money block, you have a limiting belief around money. Or you have this block, it's a limiting belief around that. What is a good technique that actually works, that helps somebody to identify their limiting belief and to remove it?
So in terms of finding a limited belief, it's like, what story, like, okay, so if I break it down, so the way I work is I work with 4 areas of life. So money and career, love and relationships, health and wellness, and creative expression. So that's kind of like if you enjoy baking or painting or just whatever you feel good doing. And it's like, what story do you have in those 4 areas of your life? And so with like money and career, for example, what story are you telling yourself? So for example, I did a masterclass on money just on Monday, and what I shared in there is just like, for example, for me, my dad always said the tax man always takes your money. So for me, because in the UK you've got like a certain bracket. Once you go over that, then they tax you a higher rate. So for me, I've always tried to stay under that, just because I didn't want the tax man to take my money. So it's like stories like that that sit within you, and then you look at your behavior and you think, what was I doing? And that stopped me from basically earning more than I could have. And it's like, my granddad taught my dad to always save money, who then taught me to always save money. So I've always held on to money like that. Whereas money is just, it's an energy exchange. So rather than, it's a flow of giving and receiving. So I was holding on to it. So rather than giving and then receiving, I was blocking that. So it's like, what are the stories that you're telling yourself that aren't, that are blocking things from happening? And it's like, when you dive in and you actually look at, like, say for example, even with like vision boards, or if you're trying to, people try and manifest something and it's just not happening. It's like, what are you doing that is, you're trying to control something, for example, or like even like health and wellness. It's like, are you thinking from a negative mindset, in the sense that when you like look at yourself, are you thinking of yourself from a place of like illness, or like, are you thinking of your place from like abundance, like, I love my body, I appreciate my body? Or are you thinking of yourself like, oh, this hurts and this hurts, and oh, I wish this was like smaller, or this was bigger, or something like that kind of thing? So it's like, what are the stories that you're saying in those areas of your life? Like, what are you telling yourself? And it's just like, each one of those, break it down. Like, what are you telling yourself? Are you telling yourself that everyone always gets sick? I know, like at the moment, like with the pandemic, there's a lot of people who are afraid, and it's like, what story are you telling yourself around that, for example? Or do you constantly say that as you get older you get iller? Or even like with money, for example, is like it's the root of all evil, for example. Like, what are the sort of key things that you believe about each of those 4 areas? And then start digging into those, and then that's where you can then try getting into the high ecstatic state and reprogram it that way. Or just meditating and just really connecting in with yourself. I think meditation is really, really, really powerful. And I know like a lot of people don't like it because of the mind chatter. I've struggled with the mind chatter for long, but if you keep going with it, the stuff that comes out of meditations, like how I had that inner child healing with just through meditation, and figured out that my limited belief around speaking up, being visible, was all because little Karishma was terrified. Like, things like that happen and you're just like, what? That's crazy. And also, like, kind of how we've touched on in this, is just like, what have you grown up in terms of culture? You've shared like how you've grown up, and like for me, for example, like, this is completely off topic, but for me, like being an Indian girl in my 30s unmarried is just like, oh hell no. So
that's a big one.
Yeah. So it's things like that. It's like, what is culturally right that you feel you should be doing, but is actually just because society thinks that's right, but not actually what you want to do. So for example, limited belief is like, in the Indian culture, is like, if you're not married by 30, there's something wrong with you. Whereas I'm like, here, like, hell, my business is going well, I'm an independent woman. So it's stuff like that. Like, actually, where you've been programmed from, like DNA, your parents, it's like all the things everyone externally has been telling you, like society, that you go to school, you get a job, you buy a car, you have the 2 kids, and then it's like all that sort of stuff. That's what society says is right, but what is right for you? And that's the limited beliefs, is like all the things that others, like externally, you've been told is the right thing. That is where you get to say, what is my identity? Who is Nora? Like, who is Karishma? Who am I? Who do I want to be? And then that's who you strive to become.
I think that's one of the most powerful things that you've said. Who do I want to be? Who am I? Because that's freeing in itself. When you, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, because I love that. When you take a step back and do that, you're almost giving yourself permission to show up and be authentically you. And in that, you sort of break free of those shackles that you put on yourself, don't you? And so it's easier to then, because I was going to ask you about, okay, well, we looked at limiting beliefs and you talk about journaling, identifying it, but how do you reprogram it? And the reprogramming for me, at least how it would work for me, is looking, and I think it's always a process of, it's not, I don't know if you would think differently, but as life happens, we grow, we change, different things happen that reveal different aspects of who we are, and we encounter situations where you reacted differently than you would have thought, and so you're constantly getting to know yourself. And I always say it's not just me, right? There's me, myself, and I. So there are different, like, sort of aspects of who Nora is. And so, and I think that's just mind-boggling, because like I talk to myself, like we all have that inner chat, and I'm like, who is talking to me? Well, it's me. Like, it's 2 people, you know what I mean? I'm listening to some things, like it's just not me alone. I find that just mind-blowing. But when you give yourself that permission to show up as who you want to show up as in this world, and to be yourself, and you commit to being, because you got to be brave, right? It's an intention. It's like you have to do it. You've got to not just say, okay, well, this is who I want to be. Like, you make that commitment to yourself to be who you are, then you go in the direction of what's meant, your higher purpose, right? And then the reprogramming sort of happens authentically, because you make the decisions that support your authentic self. I think that's really powerful. So you let go of stories like, the taxman always takes your money. You let go of those stories and you hold on to what's true for me. Let me go and experience this and bring that in. I think that's just gold.
Yeah, it is. And
Absolute
it's so
gold,
powerful. Yeah. And that's kind of why we're on this planet, is we've got all this programming, but it's coming back to who we are and then living from that place. And it's like, when you're coming from that place, like everything is just flowing and everything's easy, because you're not fighting against what you don't want to do or don't want to be. It's like, it's just like, that's who you truly are, and that's where your true happiness comes from. And it's like, we're kind of programmed to look externally for happiness or love or anything really, or power even, but actually it's all within us already, and that's where all the answers are. And so it's like, when you get to that point, then you're just like, yes, this is what it's all about.
That's really powerful stuff. So one more question.
Yeah.
Those who so for me, taking everything that you said tonight, I think it's like, for me, what I want to do, which I have stopped doing because I journal, and I find like there are heavy things that have happened to me that, like, over the last decade in particular, for me, has been what I would say the most traumatic in my entire life. And so I was talking to my sister about some of it tonight, and I think you get to those, the conversations get really heavy, and energetically I just need to be light. And I know that's a feeling for a lot of people that I've spoken to now. They just feel really heavy. And to shift that heaviness, you have to release it. But then there's that resistance to do the work. So, right, I think you know what I'm going to ask you. How do you, because you have to do the work. There's no, there's no process. Like, you just got to show up and do it. How do you shift your mindset to make it, to sort of combat that resistance? Because when you're talking to me, I'm like, okay, Vivian and I need to go get diaries. We need to have like a practice in the evening. Instead of story time, because we pray sometimes. Instead of that, it's okay, let's sit down and meditate, breathe, journal about our day, release the funk, then go on to do those things. So you're ending the evening on a light note. And then I'm thinking, oh my God, like I need to go through all of these 4 areas that you've mentioned. And because each of them influence the other, completely. It's not just one, money and career don't have it impacts creative expression, which impacts everything ties in. And I'm like, oh my God, I have work to do. I'm going to be journaling for hours tonight, but it's needed. It's like we have the same way we exercise and we sweat, or the same way that we detox and we cleanse. It's the same way that we need to also address the emotion. So how would you recommend people start to take that time for themselves to make a practice of, because I find this stuff is just so powerful, and especially tapping into the inner child, because it's that and because especially for the older people, like we've never been taught to go back to the inner child and comfort, heal, love, nurture, and support that inner child. We don't talk about that. Back in like if I told my father about inner child, he'll say, "What do you want about what inner child? You're grown up."
Yeah.
So how do you how do
Exactly.
you how would you encourage or not instruct, but tell people how to do that, how to build that into their day?
So I mean, it's all about building a habit. It's basically building that habit and doing it consistently for I can't remember if it's 60 or 90 days where you
60, yeah, it's a long
yeah,
time. Yeah.
it's like building that habit, and also doing it at the same time every day. It kind of brings it into a routine. And also, like, say for example, if you're going to meditate, you could have like a little area in like your sitting room or your room or somewhere where you just have like whatever you feel like. It could be like candles, it could be crystals, it could just be like a pillow on the floor. Just having that little space so your mind knows that's meditation space. Like, as soon as you go there, your mind knows, right, this is the jam time, this is meditation time, this is journaling time or whatever. So your mind is like programmed to know that, okay, this is what we're doing right now. It's just having that little space, and that's really powerful, doing it at the same time, so you get into the habit of like, rather than like, oh, I could do it at 6, or actually I'm going to make dinner, so I'll do it at 7. Oh wait, no, I gotta go for a shower. Oh, I'll do it at 8. So if you do it every day at say 5 o'clock, for example, then that's the set time, and it just helps to build that habit up. And also, like, something that really, I mean, I don't know if it'll help anyone else, but something that really helped me is, like my coach said to me, is when you're on your deathbed and you look back, are you going to be happy with what you've done with life? Like,
Hard question though. Because that's such a hard question, because like
it's
that,
really hard,
yeah.
but
Because
it's
for
just
me, like it's a complete change of lifestyle, and I'm
like,
like, well, how the hell am I going to like, yeah, how the hell
yeah,
am I going to do that? Like, yeah, that's a hard question.
it is hard.
Hmm.
But I think it also, I think like the intention behind that is just like, how much do you want this? Like, how much do you want it for yourself? And that's what it comes down to. Because the thing is, it's like, I can sit here and I can give you all the tips, but at the end of the day, if you, or like the ladies who watch this, like, if it's not in you to do it, you're not going to do it, because if you end up doing it, then you're just going to resent doing it. So unless you truly want to, do the work, that has to come from you, and that has to come from within. Is like, it's kind of like, right, I'm ready to find out who the true me is underneath all this programming. Who is the real me? Like, if you want to meet that person, it's time to do the work.
I'm gonna end with a question. What are your top 3 tips for somebody listening to this? With everything you've talked about, with inner child healing, with trauma, with the subconscious mind programming, with limiting beliefs, what are your top 3 tips for somebody who has gone through the journey of life and has experienced ups and downs like we all do, because that's what we're meant to experience as a human being, and they're looking to transform and change but are not sure how? What are your top 3 tips to them the things that they can do today to transform and change their life so that they can show up and live their best, true, authentic self?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Mhm.
I think I think firstly I would ask, like, what makes you feel good? Like, forget everything around you, like block out the kids or the dogs or the fish or the cat or, you know, the husband or like the parents or whatever. Like, what do you actually enjoy? What makes you feel good? And I think coming from that place is like living from that place of feeling good and actually enjoying stuff, rather than like, oh, I got to sort the dinner out, I got to do this, I got to do that. But actually, when was the last time you felt good? And I think that's something we just don't do a lot, because we're so busy in this day and age. We're just like the next thing and then the next thing and then the next thing. Is like, actually stop for a second and feel good. Secondly, I would say is, whatever you do, like, prioritize self-love. And I don't mean like, you know, sitting in a bubble bath or whatever. I mean like actually connecting in with yourself and truly, whether it's, you know, whether you need to forgive yourself for something, whether you need to, you know, just look yourself in the mirror and build. I mean, it might be, you know, you need to take time and, you know, to say I love you and actually mean it. Keep doing it every day. And when you start to connect in to that love for yourself, it just changes everything else. It's like a domino effect for everything else in your life. And that is basically what will help change those four other areas. When you have self-love, that makes a difference on all of that. So that is also something I would prioritize. And of course, doing your subconscious work is probably the most key thing. Is just, you know, however you do it, whether you choose to do it with, like, you know, working with a coach, whether it's just dancing in the kitchen and commanding stuff into your subconscious mind, whether it's journaling, meditating, whether it's, you know, just having these habits, daily habits, whether, you know, whatever it might be, just getting that old programming out and getting that new programming in. Because it's kind of like, you know, with a computer, for example, if there's loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of tabs open, it starts to slowly slow down. And, you know, that's kind of how, like, the subconscious is. It's like all these different tabs are open, but it's time to start closing them down, clear it out, and bring in the new. And
Anything else you'd like to share with the audience before we end?
If it's okay with you, I'd love to invite, like, the ladies for a breakthrough
Absolutely.
call with me. I
Lovely.
will give you the link for it. So it's a complimentary breakthrough call with me. So if they would love to join me, that would be incredible. I would be so happy to help anyone out. And yeah, I just want to thank you for having me. And also just remember, like, using your mind is probably the most powerful thing. It's like, regardless of what's happening, I know a lot of the ladies are, you know, understanding more about health and fitness, and have had different sort of traumas and things like that. But it's like, actually mastering your mind will be more powerful than trying to, you know, change any muscle in your body, or, you know, trying to, you know, change the career you have or anything like that. It's just like mastering your mind and doing your inner work will just reflect outwards, and then, like law of attraction, it will reflect back at you. So that's also something I'd like to leave the ladies with.
Thank you. Okay, I've really enjoyed this conversation. Where can people connect with you on social media? Do you have like an Instagram handle or
Yes.
Facebook? Yeah.
Yes, so I'm on Instagram at Karishma V Sharma, and on Facebook it's at Karishma V Sharma Coaching. So I will send you the details, and then that might be easier. And then I will send the link also for people to have a breakthrough call with me.
So good. And I hope you guys take her up on that. Like, I'm already thinking after today, I'm like looking around, how many free journals do I have to go journal all this stuff
Amazing.
out?
I love action takers. Come
Yeah,
on.
no, it's powerful because, like, I always believe like you hear stuff at the right time. I don't believe in things just happening randomly. Like I said before, everything, like even our interview, it's happened at the right time. For somebody
Absolutely.
hearing
I
it
was
whenever it's,
thinking that. I was
yeah.
thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you for whatever you've brought into my experience after I sit and do this work. I probably have a lot of tears and a lot of crying, but like the release is good, which is probably why I keep putting it off because I'm gonna be doing lots of crying. but
But tears
seeing
are
how
good. Tears are good.
they are, I welcome them, they're cleansing, but seeing how it's like transformed your life and the journey that it's taken you on, like it's just why I really believe in the power of sharing stories and being, authentic and open and willing to connect and just be human. Like you never know who you help and inspire. And in that, like I always say, like we are the world. We connect, you don't just show up and you're just one human being by yourself. Everything you do influences somebody, and that it reaches out to the entire world. So thank you so much for sharing your story and for being so open and authentic. And we will stay in touch. I wish you all the best, and I'm excited. I'll probably like message you and tell you, oh, Karishma, I've done it. Like this, this is
I love that. Yes, make sure you
I
do.
so will.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, and I hope this
pleasure.
has been very useful to all the ladies as well.
Definitely. Much blessings, Karishma. Take care.
Thanks.
All right. Bye.